Let me ask you something. How long have you been sitting on it? Not thinking about it, not praying about it, sitting on it. Like it's yours to keep instead of yours to build. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That thing that wakes you up at 3 a.m., that idea that keeps showing back up no matter how many times you try to bury it under your regular life. That vision you've been carrying around for what, 2, 3, 4 years, maybe longer. And every time someone asks you about it, you've got an answer ready. I'm working on it, or the timing isn't right, or I'm figuring out the details. But if we're honest, and that's what we do here, you haven't moved, not really. And today I want to talk about why, because I don't think it's a strategy problem. I don't think it's a resource problem. I don't even think it's a timing problem. I think fear has been lying to you. And the most dangerous part, you've been letting it. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped calling it fear and started calling it discernment. So welcome to the Execution Lab. I'm DeAndre Peterson. Let's get into it.
IDs are cheap. Execution pays. Welcome to the Execution Lab. This ain't talk, this ain't theory. We don't wait till the path get clear. If you got a dream and you serious, clock in, yeah, we execute in here. Plan it, test it, break it, rebuild.
So I want to start by drawing a line that most people never draw, because if you can't identify the voice, you can't challenge the voice, right? There are two voices that show up every time God gives you a vision, every single time, no exceptions. The first voice is fear, and fear says one thing. It says something bad will happen. Now, it doesn't always say it that directly. Sometimes it says it dressed up in logic. The market is saturated, or you don't have enough experience. Or what if you fail publicly? What will people think? But underneath all of that, every single time, the core message is the same. Something bad will happen if you move. The second voice is intuition, and I want to be specific here, and I'm talking about God-given intuition, the thing he put inside you that was already aligned with your purpose before you were even made aware of it. And that voice doesn't say something bad will happen. That voice says something very different. It says, this isn't the right path. It gives you clarity. It gives you redirection. It gives you peace, even when the decision is hard. And here's the difference, and I need you to lock this in. Fear creates anxiety and paralysis. Conviction creates clarity and direction. One of them shrinks you, the other moves you. So one keeps you spinning, the other gives you a next step. Now, here's the problem. Most people can't tell those two voices apart. And because they can't tell them apart, they let fear get into the driver's seat, and then they look at what fear is doing and call it wisdom, or they call it patience, or they call it waiting on God. And that right there is one of the most dangerous places an entrepreneur and a person with a God-given vision can live, right? Not in outright rebellion, not in blatant disobedience, but in that comfortable middle ground where you've convinced yourself that your inaction is actually spiritual. I've seen it, I lived it, and I'm here today to call it out. So let's talk about how fear disguises itself, because it doesn't just show up wearing a name tag. It doesn't announce itself. It's subtle. It's sophisticated. It's been studying you a long time, and long enough to know exactly what language to respond to. There are three costumes fear wears most often with people who have a faith foundation. Costume number one is called the I'm waiting for confirmation. Now, I want to be very careful here, because I believe in confirmation. I believe God confirms. But let me ask you something. How many confirmations have you gotten already? How many times has the same message shown up in your devotional, in a sermon, in a conversation you weren't even trying to have? How many times have you felt that pull and had that peace and said, okay, that was God, and then still didn't move, right? At some point, waiting for another confirmation is not faith. It's stalling with a spiritual label on it. Costume number two, I'm waiting on timing. Timing is real. I'm not dismissing that, but here's what I've learned, that most people who say they're waiting on timing don't actually have a specific time they're waiting for. They don't have a date circle. They don't have a milestone they're waiting on. Timing is just an open-ended delay with no accountability attached to it. So you're not waiting on timing. You're waiting until it feels safe. Let's be honest. And here's what I need you to understand. It never will feel safe. Costume number three, I'm waiting until I feel ready. This one right here may be the most dangerous one of all, because readiness is a feeling, and feelings are not a reliable launch mechanism. If you're waiting for ready, you'll wait forever. I have never, not once, ever worked with a successful entrepreneur who felt completely ready before they started. Not one. The feeling of readiness is almost a byproduct of starting, not a prerequisite to start. Action creates readiness, not the other way around. So when you hear yourself saying any of those three things, I need confirmation, the time isn't right, I'm not ready, I need you to pause and ask yourself one honest question. Is this God asking me to wait, or is this fear asking me to stop? Because those two are completely different instructions. And here's where it gets real. What most people call waiting is actually negotiating. And I want you to listen up right here. I want you to lock in. And I want to break this down because this is the thing that nobody's talking about. When God gives you a vision, a clear, confirmed, undeniable direction, and you do not move on it, you just stand still, you enter into a negotiation with yourself, with fear, and sometimes, if we're being completely transparent with God, okay, God, I'll do it, but can you make it a little more clear first? Or I'll start, but can you remove this obstacle first? Or this, I'm going to do it, I just need a little more time. Give me just a little more time. That's not faith. No, that's bargaining. And the dangerous thing about negotiating with fear is that fear is a patient negotiator. It will sit across from that table from you as long as you let it. And it doesn't have a deadline. It doesn't have somewhere else to be. No, fear is good, just chilling and hanging out with you. It just keep adding conditions to the deal until the vision dies from delays. And this is what happens over time. And this is the part I really need you to hear. The longer you sit in that negotiation, the quieter the original instruction gets. The urgency phase, the clarity gets murky, and you start to second guess whether you even heard it right in the first place. Until eventually you can't remember what that vision felt like when it was fresh, when it was on fire, when it felt like the most obvious thing in the world to you. See, fear doesn't always kill your vision with a dramatic no. Most of the time, it kills it with a slow, quiet, not yet. And not yet becomes not ever. And you spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you just moved when you were supposed to. And I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm trying to be honest because that's a tragedy I refuse to let happen to the people in this community, the people that hear me, without at least putting up a fight. Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem. So now let's talk about the prescription because I'm not here just to make you feel convicted. I'm here to give you something you can actually use. So I'm going to give you framework. Framework number one is the 70% rule. Now, you don't need 100% certainty to move. Let me say that again. You do not need 100% certainty to move. In fact, waiting for 100% certainty is almost always a symptom of fear, not wisdom. So the 70% rule says this: when you have 70% of the information you need, you move. You make the decision. You take the step. Because here's the reality: the other 30% can only be learned by doing. It's not available to you from a distance. It only reveals itself in the execution. Think about this. You can research a market for 2 years, but until you actually put an offer out there, you will never know how that market responds to your specific solution. That last 30% lives on the other side of the decision. So move at 70, course correct as you go. Framework number two: action creates motivation. This is what I call the motivation myth, and it's killing more visions than fear is. The myth sounds like this: once I feel motivated enough, I'll start. See, that's backwards. That's completely backwards. Motivation is not a prerequisite for action. It's a byproduct of action, right? The feeling that you're waiting on, that surge of energy and that clarity, and yes, this is it, feeling, that doesn't come before you move. It comes because you move. Every single time you take an action toward your vision, no matter how small, you create evidence. And that evidence builds confidence. And that confidence builds momentum. And that momentum creates motivation. Let me say that again. Every time that you take an action toward a vision, no matter how small, it creates evidence. And that evidence builds confidence. And that confidence builds momentum. And that momentum creates motivation. But none of that starts without the first step. And the first step almost always feels like the last thing you want to do. Framework number three: failure as data. One of the biggest reasons people don't move on their vision is because they're terrified of failing publicly. And I get it. It's vulnerable, especially when the vision is tied to your faith, or when you've told people, God told me to do this, and then it doesn't go the way you plan. But here's the reframe I want you to carry with you. Failure is not a verdict. It's data. That's all it is. Every setback tells you something. Every launch that underperforms, every offer that didn't convert, every door that closes, that's not God saying, I was wrong about you. That's the market giving you information that you couldn't have gotten any other way. It's course correction data. It's the last 30%. So the question is not, what if I fail? The question is, what will I learn when it doesn't go perfectly? And how will I use that to get better? See, entrepreneurs and individuals who execute aren't people who don't fail. There are people who decided in advance that failure is part of the process, and they refuse to let it be the end of the story. So either you win or you learn. That's the only option. Now, I want to close with this because I think it reframes everything we've been talking about today. Obedience doesn't wait for the comfortable. Let me say that again. Obedience doesn't wait for comfortable. Every person in scripture who was given a vision, every single one was asked to move before it was comfortable, before it was logical, before it made sense on paper, before the resources were lined up and the plan was airtight and the timing was perfect. Noah built before it rained. Abraham left before he knew where he was going. David ran toward the giant before anyone else knew he could win. And it doesn't stop there. Let me give you some modern day. Sarah Blakely started Spanx with $5,000 and no fashion industry experience. Nobody confirmed it was a good idea. No investor greenlit it. She just moved on what she knew and figured out the rest on the way. Steve Jobs pushed out of the very company that he built. Most people would have called that a verdict. He called it a detour, came back and built the most valuable company in the world. Jay-Z, he couldn't even get a single record label to sign him. Every door closed, so he built his own label, Rockefeller Records, from the trunk of his car and turned that rejection into $1 billion empire. Oprah was told she was unfit for TV, fired from her first on-air job. Then the very thing they said disqualified her became the platform that changed the world. None of them waited until it was comfortable. None of them had all the answers before they started. None of them were fearless. They just decided that the instruction was louder than the fear. That's what obedience looks like. Not the absence of fear, not the presence of perfect conditions, just a decision that the instruction is bigger than the hesitation. And here's what I know about you. The fact that you're still carrying this vision, that it hasn't died despite how long you've been sitting on it, that it keeps showing back up, that's not an accident. That's not coincidence. That's it not letting you go because you were made for it. The vision was never yours to hold. It was always yours to build. So here's your assignment before I close this video. Write down the vision exactly as you know it right now. Not a polished version, not the version you've pitched to investors. The real one. I'm talking about the real one, the one that scares you a little bit, right? Then write it down. Write down the one step, just one, that fear has been keeping you from taking. Not the whole plan, just the next step, and then take it this week, not next month, not when you feel ready, to take it this week. Because obedience doesn't wait for the guaranteed. It moves on what it already knows while it's clear. Got it? Can we do that? Can we agree to that? And if this episode has hit home, I want you to share it with someone who's been sitting on their vision a little too long. And if you're ready to stop negotiating and start executing, hit the link below. Let's connect and let's get to work.
Ideas are cheap. Execution pays. Welcome to the execution lab. This ain't talk, this ain't theory. We don't wait.